What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over upgraded X attacks. So we made X attacks in our game quite a long time ago at this point, and they were still using the old input system. So there are quite a few things we can improve upon and actually flat out remove to make our lives a lot easier. Now that we have our command list, we can actually add them to the command list and make them function based off that functionality. We already have things like super meter usage in place, so meter burn attacks in general can be fully functional. But I actually want to get rid of the old hard to execute logic, and I just want to basically bind them to pressing 2 keys at the same time and requiring super meter. So basically, if I am to, let's do, it's been a while. I think my taunt is maybe, no, what is my taunt? There we go. Finally got my taunt. So now that I've built super meter, I should be able to perform my X attack. So now I'm going to use this is my standard light attack. I'm going to use my light attack with an X attack button or some other button of my choosing. Like in this case, I choose light and medium. And I'm going to be able to use a different version of this attack as opposed to the standard attack. Use my meter, apply a little visual effect there and go about the rest of the game. It's that simple. So yeah, we're going to be making sure these moves can actually happen and get rid of all the old logic we didn't need to avoid any more confusion. I want to get rid of that before we go into the other episodes of Combat Flow. Just get rid of any old logic that we don't need that's making our logic harder on ourselves to understand and to work with. So let's just clean up our X attacks, get this out of the way, and you'll be able to add them to your game. Nice and simple. Alright, before we get started, we're on episode 134 of the Fighting Game Tutorial series. We've come very far from the beginning, but we still have very far to go. So if you'd like to follow along, get caught up, and see how we progress, feel free to click on this icon in the top right corner right here. This will bring you to the playlist where I've done all the fighting game content, as well as some additional episodes that are helpful and you can use. Otherwise, I'll link to this episode right here, which is where we first set up X attacks. It is important because we are still going to be using some of the same logic, some of the same values, but we're going to take out a lot of the extra stuff we don't need. So you can even do a before and after comparison to show you how much better the new system is. And otherwise, we can go ahead and get started. So, first things first is we're actually going to add these attacks to our character's command buffer. So if you go to the mutant BP or your code class for your specific character, wherever it is that you do your, you set up your commands. It can be in the blueprint or the code. It really doesn't matter, just as long as you know where you do it. And we're going to add just a new command. Literally add another command to the character. So for mutant BP, I went ahead and added an X light attack. You can do this for medium, heavy, special. You'd have multiple meter burns for each attack, like you could have a projectile that you can use as a meter burn projectile as well. It's all up to you how you want to set it up. It's completely customizable. I'm calling these X attacks because I'm familiar with them being called that, but you can think of these as shadow moves, meter burn moves, whatever you'd like. Basically, we don't want to use our standard light attack when we press this combo, so this has to have a priority order that takes priority over our standard light attack. Okay, and we want to integrate it into our current system so we don't have to build extra rules to perform X attacks. The only thing I will say before we jump into this is that if you like, you could have an X attack button or like a shadow move button. You'd have a button that you have to press alongside your other buttons, or it could be any type of input you want. Like it has to be medium. It has to be 2 of the same type. Like Killer Instinct, they do 2 of the same type of punch, or all 3 of the same type of input. So like punch or kick. So heavy punch, heavy kick, or you could do medium and heavy kick, or medium and light kick. You have all the possibilities that you could think of. It's really fully up to you. There's not really a standard. There are some standards that games use, but in general, it can vary a lot. So my point with all that being is you don't have to follow how I'm setting this up. We're going to take note of all the things that are useful and what we're getting rid of in our old system. But as for the actual commands, this is entirely up to you. What I've decided to do is use light and medium attack as my X attack. So what this means is I have to hold both of these or just press both of them. They're not really holds, but the input status of hold within our game means that it's still expecting another input. Hold is essentially we will wait. So if you're charging it, you could hold it, but also if you're just waiting for another input, like in a multi-button press like this, then we can hold them. So what I've done is I've added a new command. Like I said, I've called it X light attack. I've added 2 input types. So I require a light attack and a medium attack that are holds. They don't require any charge frames. The state, I require no action, meaning that it can just happen from idle. I do require a meter, since this is a meter burn attack, so I'm requiring 1/4 of the meter. Max frames between inputs is 12, so I have 12 frames to press both of them to trigger that. Max frames can be held at 0, it's not a chargeable attack. Current frames is always 0 by default. We're not currently charging, and we haven't used the command. Okay? So basically, just add your X attacks in here as part of your command list, character commands. All right. And once you've done that, you'll have the ability to use that command without any further additional logic. You'll have the ability to use that command at least from the code standpoint. Once you press those inputs, you'll be able to use them. So it might not be bound to anything, but you should get a log message, if nothing else, saying like they've used the command. And I actually should have it here. Characters using the command X light attack. Okay. So that'll already be working. And what we can do is go into our AnimBP and set up this command the same way we set up our other commands, and we'll literally be able to use our X attacks. Then we get into the fun stuff of cleaning up all the old logic that we had for this. So let's go into our animation blueprint, and we have this X light attack in here already. We're going to get into cleaning that up after. Let's go into adding the new state first, okay? So what we really want to do here is add a new command, and I've made a new state, and I've called it command X light attack. Okay, so I have my animation in here. Here are my settings. I've just slowed down the play rate so you can see that it's different, but really this isn't required. You should probably speed it up if anything, or add some global time dilation to make it more dramatic. But basically, it's my standard rifle punch, but I do have specific anim notifies for this this animation. It's different from my regular rifle punch because I have this one right here, which is definitely different from my X attack, okay? Speed's different, and the anim notifies are different. So, the anim notifies aren't really important here. Any anim notifies you see on this were covered in previous episodes, so it doesn't really matter what these are. But the reason I point this out is I have different notifies than my standard one, so I can provide different damages when I spawn the hitboxes. Also, I'm going to apply a couple effects on started, active, and ended, so to make the game a little bit flashier, we can make a material that we can apply, and that'll be that. The Ken combo, don't worry about that. We'll cover the combo logic again in a future combat flow episode when we upgrade that. We're going through upgrading all our systems as we can to make it more functional as a whole. All right. So anyway, that's my animation for my X attack. All right. Now the transitions are pretty much what you'd expect. So idle to X attack is everything that you're used to. If you followed the series, all the commands are basically going to be this way. There's a start attack transition that plays in the start transition event when going to the command. Okay. And we have the transition rule of basically the only rule we use for all of our commands, all of our attacks now, is we grab our character reference, we grab their array, we get the specific index since we know that this is the X light attack transition, and then we can find out and say index 22 is our X light attack. So we get that element and we check if has used command is true. This is set to true whenever we actually meet the requirements in our input buffer of performing that command. If that's true, we go ahead and we play the animation. That's how we cover all of our other commands. So now we've just upgraded to this better system. Now, on the flip side, returning back to idle, we make it automatic rule based. So once the animation is done, it returns to idle. We also have an end attack transition event in the start transition event. That's literally it. That's all we do, just like any of our other commands. I would go over it in more depth, but you guys have seen it a lot. So literally that's all there is to it. the start attack transition and attack transition, if you want to see them, we can. Just so that we're all on the same page, but we have seen these many times throughout the series. So here's start attack transition, here's end attack transition. We set basically if the character can move or not. We go ahead and we set the attack startups, the attack states, so we know if we're in startup, active, recovery, or back in the default. Reset any necessary variables to reset, and clear up any hitboxes in case any lingered based on being canceled and things like that. Okay. Now, that stuff's all well and good, but you guys could have figured that out if you watched the series. You could have set that up for yourself. That's not a big deal. However, the important part of today's episode is getting rid of the convoluted logic we had for X attacks before. It's super important because now we have a better system to handle it, and we don't want to ostracize these things. We don't want to work on these elements individually, like the X attacks, the meter burn attacks individually, and separate them from the command buffer. That makes them harder to deal with in the future, harder to avoid bugs with, and just in general, it's pretty bad practice. So now we don't need to do this. So let's go over everything that we've done in our blueprints and in our code regarding X attacks that we can now get rid of. So first things first. The way we were previously setting this up is we had no priority order when we set up our X attacks initially. So for an attack that required inputs that another attack had, unless I change the priority order to make this a better priority and press the inputs on the exact same frame, it would only ever go to light attack. So how we set up this X attack was to have a light attack that transitioned into the X move. Okay, so we had the move transition into itself if the other input was pressed after the first one was. That's incredibly difficult to perform because we only had a few frames where we could actually do it, and also we had to set up different transitions for every single input. So if you had one for like every move, you would have to have another state that you could transition to. It also looked choppy because we played the entire animation over again. So good news is we don't even need this old X light attack transition anymore. So first of all, we don't need the states in here. If you had any transition events, you can get rid of them. And we also don't need the actual state itself. So I'm going to delete the state entirely. All right, we don't need that. We don't need anything about it. It's transition back to idle or transition to the light attack. Okay, just to make everything clear, we don't need any of this. All right, so get rid of that. Now we just have idle to light attack and light attack back to idle. Now that's better, but there is one thing here that we have to keep track of. Before, where we had our attacks that could go to those X versions, I had a different transition event, and I was calling it start potential X attack transition. This sent some other booleans and things that I was preparing for those X versions. Well, we don't need that anymore, and especially not in our standard light attack, but really we don't need it, period. So first of all, let's copy this name and let's search for it, and let's go to this event. Okay, that's right here, and you can see that it has it's pretty much the same thing as above, but it's actually slightly different because doing things like not resetting variables and whatever other oddness we have. Really, this is kind of pointless. I mean, we don't need this anymore because we're not using the old system. So I'm going to get rid of this anim notify entirely from our anim BP. Okay. It's gone. And I'm just going to fill it in with our standard start attack transition. So idle to light attack is not going to have this anymore. It's going to be start attack transition. Or in other words, it's going to be exactly like our commands. See? This is the start transition on the new command we added. And this is it on light attack now. Now they're the same. Now light attack back to idle should just be end attack transition. Right? Now, on this animation itself, we also don't need to have can use X attack because we're not going to be using this anymore unless you want to be able to cancel from this one into the X version. That is something you could actually do because moves can cancel into each other. So you could feel free to leave it if you wanted to do it for that purpose. But if you're just using this anim notify because we used it, let's go ahead and go to that event right now. So go back to the event graph. We should have an event called can use X attack. So for me, I didn't even have a can use X attack. I actually had can use I had can use X attack on the animation, but in the event graph, I have can use X light. Very strange, especially because the logic isn't even correct here. When this Boolean would hit, we're setting can use X attack to false. So all in all, this is just bad. Let's get rid of this can use X light, can use X attack, whatever it is. We don't need that anim notify anymore. On top of it, we can get rid of the anim notify on the actual animation related to our X attacks. So you can just delete them. All right, so we get rid of everything related to X attacks on our old animations. That's the point I'm trying to make. It doesn't matter if yours was just like mine or not. Just get rid of any transitions from them. We're going to go straight from idle to this and straight from any states we want to be able to enter this state from. We don't need to do any of that weirdness we were doing before. That cleans up our event graph quite a bit, especially if you had multiple X attacks. I only have that one, but again, theoretically, you could have meter burn moves for any of your attacks. It's entirely up to you. So cleaning that up is super important. Makes our lives a lot easier. Okay. Now, what we're going to do from here is we are now going to change some of our logic in the code. So switching over, let's go ahead and go to our code. We're going to go to our fighter template character. And one thing you could do is look at anywhere you had X attacks and just kind of go through that logic. But I've already done this before, like planned it out, so I know what we're going to be going through. Okay, we're going to go into our fighter template character. Once we're in here, we're going to go and find our booleans that we set up for X attacks. So we had booleans that we had made for our special X versions of attacks, and they were like our old attack booleans. Remember, we used to use was light attack used, was medium used. We made those for X attacks as well. Well, we don't need them anymore. We put them into the command buffer now, these X moves, so we don't need all these booleans anymore. So we can go through and we can take out our old logic. All right. So we have was heavy X attack used, was medium X attack used, was light X attack used. They can all be taken out. Okay. We also have can use X attack. You could keep this one. You could add it as an additional boolean when trying to perform one of them through the actual input buffer command system that we have. So that's up to you if you want to leave this one. I might leave it because we could have like a status effect that stops you from using these meter burn moves. That very well could be something. I've actually seen that be used before as a mechanic in games. So we could still leave this boolean on the character. For that, I'm not going to get rid of can use X attack, although we don't actually need to have it do anything at the moment. That can be in a later episode. So I'm going to leave that boolean. All right. And we could address that later if we run into issues. Now, those are the three main ones. Let's actually close the editor, and I'm going to try and build. We're going to get errors, and that's okay. I just want to address these things while I want to show you while we're going through it so we get rid of everything that we don't need in one go. All right. Now, once we build this here, the errors will relate to a function that we made where we were trying to determine what X attack to use. Now, the old system, like I said, it determined what attack we were currently in. Like if we're in the light attack, we know we want to go to the X version of that light attack. So we're going to want to go through here, you reset all of our booleans and get rid of any instances of them. So was light X attack used? Get rid of it. This is supposed to be was medium X attack used? It wasn't, but get rid of it. There we go. Was heavy X attack used? Get rid of it. We don't need those anymore. Okay. So in the constructor, by the way, that's where that was. Sorry if that was confusing. Right in the constructor where we set all of our defaults, you can get rid of them. Now, let's scroll down, and the next function we're looking for is start exceptional attack. It's like how we have our other attacks, like start attack 1, 2, 3, and 4. We had a start an exceptional attack. And we had all this nice logic in here, basically. If we had used this attack and our super meter was above this amount and can use X attack was true, then we're setting it to use light X attack and take the meter and add the icon on the screen. That's all well and good, but honestly, we don't really want to do this anymore either. Really, we don't want to do anything in this because start exceptional attack never really has to fire. I mean, we don't ever need to do a specific action for this. We're now running it like any other command. Okay, so we can go into our fighter template character, find that function. I called it start exceptional attack. So for me, it's up at the top. Okay, right where I have my start attacks and release attacks, I have start exceptional attack. I'm going to get rid of that one too. We're going to get rid of that entire function, right? And then we're going to get rid of the entire function in the CPP. Clean it up. Let's build again. Let's see what else we got. And then see if anything else new comes up from that. I'll go back up to the top so we can start from there in case we run into other issues. So you can always go through the error list, or me, like I said, I like to scroll down and just find where things are red. So in our take damage, I have this section where I check if other player was light X attack used. And if that was the case, then I'm not giving meter. So basically I'm not gaining meter if it was a light X attack or not. This could be very well something that we actually use. You might not want to give meter on meter burn attacks, and that makes sense. However, a much better way to do this would be to determine if it was a meter burn attack on the actual command and then avoid it, as opposed to looking through our specific booleans. Because of this, I'm going to get rid of this statement for now. We're going to be revisiting combat flow as a whole, specifically for air combat to make it better, and a few other improvements with our input buffer even. So because of that, I'm going to get rid of this for now. We can add that back. I've already made a note of this, so I'll make sure that it makes it back in. You can leave a comment here as well. For me, I'm just going to take this out. I don't need this specific check anymore. And then I can press Control-KD to format everything, get it back in line. All right. I have some other errors as well. So, in base player controller, that looks to be like the last one. Okay. So, base player controller.cpp. We have a function called call start exceptional attack, which is throwing an error right now because we got rid of our start exceptional attack function. It's okay. Let's go to our base player controller and let's take out this call start exceptional attack function. We don't need it because, again, we're not calling it separately. It's going to be part of the command, and if anything, we can call a separate function once that command runs. We're not going to have a specific action that needs to happen before the input buffer to trigger this. So I'm going to get rid of that. Quick note here, I have a new boolean here you've never seen before. It's not related to today's episode. It'll be in one of the very near episodes. So you don't have to put this in yet. Okay. Now, that means we can get rid of it in the base player controller.cpp. We don't need call start exceptional attack. So I'm cleaning that up. One other place in the base player controller that'll have it, set up input component. This is where we bind our actions to our functions that get called. So if we were to press exceptional attack P1, we would call this function on the base player controller. Well, we're going to get rid of that input action altogether, so I'm going to get rid of it and set up input component. All right, now when I build this, it should work perfectly fine. In fact, it should compile. We would have successfully gotten rid of all of the X logic that we no longer need. With that said, we can go back into the editor, so I'm going to launch, and then I'll catch up with you. Okay, I'm back in the editor now. Now let's open up our base character BP, because after making big changes like that, it's very likely that it will be broken. So I'm going to try and compile, and it won't work. So let's go to the nodes that it gives us. Specifically, we have a spot for exceptional attack P2. Remember we just removed this in the code? But then also remember that we have these keyboard hacks that we can use. So if you want to have multiple controllers, or excuse me, multiple characters on one input device like a keyboard, we have these events we can call in the BP. Well, we can flat out get rid of the exceptional attack P2 one because, again, we don't even need that anymore. So I'll get rid of that, make some room. When I try to compile now, it's going to succeed. And that's good. But there's something else we should do. Since we got rid of those input action bindings, we should go into our project settings, edit project settings, input, and we should find our exceptional attack P1 and P2, and we can get rid of them. Now, if you did want an input for these, like this is a specific button for meter burn moves, then you could leave these. You could leave these inputs. These could be things that you wanted to do. However, if your X versions and these special attacks are meant to be performed by multiple buttons, multiple of the same type, such as multiple punches, multiple kicks, or, you know, a punch and a kick of the same level, or light, medium, whatever it is that you want. Those can be determined later. And they can be set up through macros if you want to be able to press a singular button and perform that action. Because of that, we don't really need an exceptional attack or exceptional attack P2 input in our project settings. You can leave them if you want. I'm making that as clear as I can be. You don't have to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of this because when we set up macros in the future, we can go ahead and cover that sort of mechanic. But I'm not going to have one directly bound to the exceptional attack. Okay, so I'm going to remove my bindings for P1 and P2 exceptional attacks, just to further clean up everything. I'm trying to clean up everything I can as we go through the series. To try and play it, if you get errors, we'll go and address them as well. So let's go into our... I tried to play it. I got an error in our NMBP again, so we must have missed something. Let's go into our NMBP. And it says that these variables are missing, which we got rid of them. So let's scroll to them. So in our reset variables function, we have these was light X attack, was medium X, and was heavy X attack. Use booleans, and they're here. They're being reset to false, but we no longer have them. So we can get rid of them in this function. Okay? I'll even clean up all the nodes related to them. Okay, let's make this nicer as well. All right, so something like this works. To get rid of all instances of those booleans, this now compiles, so this should run. When it runs, we're going to go and make sure we can still use our X attack. In fact, we can use it in an even better way now because we can actually use it through the command list. I'm going to skip all of this. Whoops. Use my taunt. Whoops, I can't remember. Okay, it's medium and heavy is my taunt. That's what it is. I keep forgetting, sorry. So now we are in here, and we need to try and see if we can use our X attack. And we can. We use it perfectly. Does damage. Fires, we return, and we have control of our character. So our move is working as a successful command. And that means we've done our job perfectly. We have upgraded our X attack. We can make it even a little bit better by going a step further and applying a special material over the character while we're in this state. It's super simple, but I'm going to show you how to do it so you can play around with it and add some cool effects on your characters. So first thing we need to do is we need to go into, I'm going to make this a base character BP function. Really, I'm going to make them 2 events. So let's see. Here we go. So I've added 2 events in the base character BP, and I've done nothing with them. You don't have to do anything to them. Okay. So I right-clicked, and I do add custom event. And you could easily make these code events as well. We probably will in the future because, as you see, we add more and more stuff in code and do less in Blueprint as we go along, as we get more familiar with everything. But either way, you can add these custom events for now in here. And I called one set X attack effects and the other one reset X attack effects. And so anytime we go into those animations that are these X versions of these attacks, we can call these functions and do specific logic to make sure that they play these effects over them. Now, we haven't gotten into these materials that have like multiple versions yet. So we can have materials and material instances that basically the material instance will be able to change per character. We haven't gone over that yet, so I'm not going to complicate things by trying to add it into this episode randomly. So what I've done instead is I've made a specific materials, a set of materials for what I've called the glowing mutant. This is a random material I made. You can feel free to take this logic. The short version of all this, because this is just the random one that I put together, but if you want to take it, you can. We need to grab the time input data, because what time does is it actually tracks as things are moving, like as time dilation changes and as actual time passes in the game, it's going to pass this data along. So using time and a parameter that we set up, a custom scalar parameter, we can determine a speed at which we want this to flash. Okay. So we can make a scalar parameter right here. Call it flash speed is what I called it. And I set the default value to 1. Then what we did, multiply these two together. So the standard 1.0, as time is changing, it's going to multiply this value. So as time changes, it's going to change how fast this flashes. Then we're going to do some calculations to make a circle around our character and smooth out some of the edges. So I've gone ahead and used sine. So the sine changes it over time, depending on the values that are passed into it. Then we're adding one value to it, or we're adding 1 to it. That way it's a value above 1, because we multiply by 0.5 to cut it in half. Then for the clamp min and max, these are values that I've set up to clamp this between, random options that I've decided. You could let it go from 0 to 1. It'll turn all the way on or all the way off. It depends on if you want it. So this is turning it the whole way off, or you can make it 0.6. We'll only let it go to 0.6 of the intensity. Okay. So I had it at 0.3 because I thought that looked nice. Then we need to do something called Fresnel to actually get the circular logic here, because this is all to get the emissive color. So if we don't do this Fresnel thing, when we plug this into the emissive color, you're going to see that it's going to color the entire material. And so I've made a vector parameter right here. Called it emissive tint, and I've chosen this red color. In that case, I made it pink, but you see what I'm saying. You actually have the values here for the color if you want to copy them. We multiply this color by this result, because if we don't, it's just going to be a standard color. So if it's 0, it's just going to be black, or basically empty, because it's got no alpha. Multiplying it by this color, you see it actually gives it a value to have. Then we want to multiply it by the shape that we want to take, which is the circle. So I made 2 scalar parameters, which is an exponent and a reflect fraction. I've only made these because this is what the Fresnel requires. Okay, so if you type in Fresnel, use it right here. It takes an exponent, so you can give it whatever exponent you want. So I made a scalar parameter. I gave it 3.9. You can make it 9. The reflect fraction, if we give it 0.1, okay, you're going to see it's pretty much the entire way through. Multiply this with your emissive tint, and that's your emissive color. Now this isn't required, but you can also multiply it by itself on the texture sample. If you do that, it'll just give it a deeper color. And I went ahead and did that. So I was just playing around with materials here. It's not really important what's in here. Anyway, once you have a material that you're set to use, since we're not using like a material instance based on the character, we have one specifically for the mutant, which I've called M Glowing Mutant. What we can do is we can go into our mutant character, which is right here, our mutant BP, and we can override these functions and then fill out the specific logic that we want. So we can actually fill out glowing mutant materials. You'll notice I've actually made a different one for a different character. It's not really that important. The important part is that what I need to do is associate the correct material when we're using this effect. So what I've actually done for that guy is I've overridden the 2 events that we made in base character BP, set X attack effects and reset X attack effects. Okay, so you can do that very easily by going to functions. When you're in the mutant BP, functions, override, and then you can select your functions. So I want set X attack effects and reset X attack effects. I've already added them, which is why I don't see them. If I were to take this away, I could override set X attack effects. Okay, and then I'm just going to put this in here, and then all I have to do is figure out what materials I want to use. So because I have made multiple materials, depending on what skin you are, then I've gone ahead and set up a switch statement to apply a specific material based on the skin index. Simply enough, I grab the skin index, which is a variable on our base character BP, determines what skin we currently are. Then I perform a switch on int. Add 2 pins, because I only have 2 skins right now that I've done this for. I could also use the default in this case. Then I go ahead and set the material of the mesh to the glowing mutant materials, either glowing mutant 1 or glowing mutant 2. Okay. Literally drag the mesh in, set material, and then select the glowing mutant. Now, when I'm resetting it, I want to set it back to the standard skin that we are based on the skin index. So for the first skin, we want to set it back to the standard mutant. But if we were the swapped skin, we want to set it back to that skin when we're done. So it's the exact same behavior copied, but we changed the materials involved. Now what I'm going to do to make things a little bit nicer is add a default here and just straighten this out. And same here. I want to add a default. Just in case we use a skin that doesn't exist, we don't like try and set it to a none material or null material. So we can do that instead. It's literally that easy. Now we just have to call this event whenever we want these effects to occur. I do that within the mutant and BP. So if I go to my blueprints, whoops, and MBPs, and I go to my, let's go to the event graph. So I have these anim notifies that I had set up on the animation, just like I did any of my other attacks. They're a little outdated, so you can see that they're a little bit different. So I just create proximity hitbox like this, and I don't use the actual data from the data table about the characters. But here's what the event looks like. So here's my X rifle punch started. I'm now just going to call character reference set X attack effects. So as soon as we start this, which if I go to this animation, should be, where is it? Right here. The started is right here. So as soon as I hit this, I'm going to go into it. I'm actually going to move that back. So like as soon as I trigger it, I go into it. And then when it's ended is when I reset it. Okay. Ended, I call character reference reset X attack effects. Simple enough. Remember that character reference is a base character BP, so it has access to that event, or those events. Now, the regular logic that's in here is, again, it's a little outdated because it should use the data table and not hard-coded values that I pass into it. I have an episode on that, so you can use the get data table row with the hitbox data. But, again, not to bloat this episode, so we don't need to do that. This is fine. Just know that you probably will want to update it to that in the future. However, I did notice there were some other nodes that I had in here that we no longer need. For example, we don't have to set the Ken move to be false when starting an attack. That's all done in the specific data now for the move. And so this is old. So this was previously connected. I disconnected it so I remember. But feel free to just take this out now. At most, this is what this anim notify should look like. Now, X rifle punch ended. We call reset X attack effects. Technically, we don't have to call reset Ken combo here, but it's fine because our combo logic is going to be overridden anyway, and I'll go over that in another time. So Ken combo and has landed hit are fine, but we were doing clear hitboxes, and we were checking if the entrances were finished, then we were enabling Ken move. This is just wacky. This is also way out of date, so I went ahead and disconnected it. You can get rid of all that stuff. At most, this is what your X rifle punch ended should have. Okay, and once we take all that out, we've cleaned up the NMBP quite a bit, and with that cleaned up, we are now able to actually use X attacks without much trouble, and we have a nice little effect that plays as well. So you can see that I can actually use my X attack right here. Boom, perfect. There we go. So I finally figured it out. I couldn't figure out what key was my heavy, but there you go. So you can see that I was actually able to convert my skin back to the skin that it was. But both players can use X attacks now without all that garbage logic that we had in the first place. Anyway, guys, that's about all I want to show you. I want to clean up X attacks. I want to make sure that they still work and they still take meter. There's still plenty more we have to do with the combat flow, so don't worry. Any little bugs you see here and there, I plan on knocking all of them out and cleaning it up even further. But that's a good episode to just kind of get rid of the old X attack logic. I just want to cover getting rid of all this while I had the time. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe. That's more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do, and I really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon members and subscribers. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for continuing to show me support. I really, really love working on these series, and I'm glad you guys do as well. It always gets me excited knowing that you guys care about it so much. If you had any issues while you were going through this episode or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I'd be happy to assist you, any of the problems you had, and get you caught up and ready to continue on with the series. Anyway, guys, like I said, that's all I got, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.